Welcome back, Cyclings, to our next little video on statistics and ethics in psychology. So this should be modules 7 and 8 in your Myers textbook. So we'll start today with statistical reasoning. So going over how to make use of statistics in psychology. So our objectives today will be to understand how psychologists use and collect information during research, how they analyze that data, and then understand those measures of central tendency. So we'll start with descriptive statistics. So descriptive statistics are things that we use to look at different numbers. Okay, we take numbers and we look and see what they tell us. Okay, so the first thing we look at are measures of central tendency. The first one is mean, or the arithmetic average. So what you do is you take up all of the scores and you average them. So in this example here, you would add 10, 11, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16. You would divide that by, how many are on there? 7, and you would get 12.7. All right, for the mean, you would line up all of those scores. So as you can see here, we lined up all of those scores, okay, and the middle score is 12. All right, so that is now your median. The mode then is the most frequent. So does a number appear oftentimes more? So here we can see that there are 2 variations of 11. So therefore, the mode would be 11. Okay, so then we look at different types of skewed distributions. So are distributions lopsided due to extreme scores? So for example, in this number description over here in the picture, if we had 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, and 82, it would be skewed because that 82 would pull that average and that median up. Okay, so that is what a skewed distribution means. We'll look more at that in class. We also then look at measures of variation. So the first thing we look at is the range. So the range is the difference between the highest and lowest scores. So in this situation, if we take 16 and we subtract 10 from it, our range then becomes 6. So I know this seems kind of basic and elementary, but this will pop up on your AP exam. So you need to make sure that you understand those types of differential statistics and descriptive statistics. The next one we have is standard deviation. So standard deviation is how much a score deviates from the mean. So you can see kind of in the picture here, the way that you can calculate it. You will never really be asked on the exam to calculate the standard deviation, but you need to know what it means. So the means basically is how far away it is from the middle. So this picture down here at the bottom is a picture of the normal distribution. All right, so we'll look at this especially when we get to intelligence testing, but this is what's called a bell curve. Okay, so your average score is going to be a 0. Okay, so from there, one standard deviation is going to be 34% from either direction. Okay, so 68% are going to be within one standard deviation of the mean, and 95% are going to be within 2 standard deviations. So what that means is, let's say that you take a test in AP Psychology and you get an 80 and you're feeling great about it. But then everybody else around you is getting 95s. Now you feel kind of bad about it. So you want to know how far off you are from the average. So that's when you use the standard deviation. It also comes into play, say if you are looking at a test and everybody around you gets a 55% and you got a 54. You're thinking to yourself, oh man, that's a terrible score, but really it's very, very similar to the other scores around you. So that standard deviation would be smaller. And we'll get more into this in class, but it's just something to kind of think about, and we will have to use that in our classes. All right, the next one we have that is inferential statistics. So inferential looks like infer, or things that we guess based on the data. So it allows us to generalize this to other populations. So we looked at, in the last video, we looked at different types of ways to collect research. One of those ways to collect research is through a survey. So can we use that information from the survey to make generalizations about other populations? And that is inferential statistics. Okay, the biggest thing here that you need to know is what's called statistical significance. Okay, and that is how likely something is to happen by chance. Okay, so if that statistical significance is less than 5%, okay, it's called a p-value being less than 0.05. That means that those numbers didn't occur by chance. They happened on purpose. Okay, and again, we'll look at that in class a little bit more, but just kind of something to keep in mind. So those are the different types of statistics that we need to make sure we are aware of in psychology. So now let's move into ethical considerations and ethics. So our objectives right now are to see those ethical considerations and how we have to use those when conducting research with both humans and animals. So this is a pretty short section, but it is something to keep in mind. So if we look at our expectations, these all come from the APA, or the American Psychological Association. So they put out, and if you go and you search APA ethical considerations, you'll find a whole list of rules that they say you have to follow when using data or testing on humans or animals. So the first thing you have to have is what's called informed consent. So you have to tell the subjects what you are going to be testing, and they have to agree to participate or not. All right, so you can't say, oh, we're going to be doing a test on whether or not you like the smell of lotion, and then all of a sudden you start applying electric shock. That's not going to be ethical, okay? So you have to tell them what they're going to be doing, and then they have to agree to it before we go in then and do the experiment. Now, the only time you do not need to have informed consent is when you have some sort of single blind study, which, remember, is when only the participant doesn't know and maybe the researcher does, or a double blind where the participant is not aware of what's going on. And the only reason you would do that is if their knowing of the procedures would ruin the study. That's the only time you don't need to have informed consent. All right. Then we also have debriefing. So after the experiment is over, you have to go back in and you have to tell the the participants what research you collected and how that research will be used. If you don't, you can't use their data. So you have to tell them what you're going to do. And then once you get done, you have to tell them what you did, what research you found, and how that research will be used. So those are the big ethical considerations you need to keep in mind, and we will talk more about this in class, but I hope this gives you a brief overview in case you need to come back and look at it or in case you wanted a preview. So we'll see you next time when we start talking about the brain and biology.